Welcome back, nerds, to Off the Top TCG. I'm joined here with my co-host Drew, the law firm Bennett Kennett, part of Team Rare Candy, and my name is Jeremy Jallin, commentator. What's on the docket for today, Drew?
Yep, so today this is episode 2 of the Sinistea Party, where we're going to spill the tea on tournaments and what's upcoming in the Pokemon TCG. We're going to talk a little bit about Pittsburgh that happened last weekend. We're going to talk a little bit about Barcelona happening in a couple days here. By the time you see this, probably tomorrow, actually. And then we're going to talk a little bit about 151 and how that said might impact Peoria and Sacramento and see if it'll shape the meta a little bit differently than what we're seeing right now. Starting out talking about Pittsburgh, Jeremy, I wasn't there, but you were commentating it. Tell me, how was the biggest regionals we've had, and to start out the year with such a bang, how was the tournament for you?
It was a lot of people. The venue was massive, and it took forever to get to the TCG side of things, at least from where I was in production. And there was just a ton of people enjoying Pokemon. I know there was some hiccups here and there throughout the day, but at least from my side of things, it ran pretty smoothly. We did get out a little late on both of the days, but that's to be expected. First regional of the years for the season, largest regional we've ever had, largest day two we've ever had, which is something to make note of. A lot of the match points and the way they broke down for placements was actually pretty scary. So one person made top eight with 35 match points that was roll ready,
Mhm.
and then there was like seven other 35 match points that just whiffed. It's something like that. And then for top 16, there was the same kind of thing, and then for top 32, it was the same kind of thing. So thousands of dollars are getting determined based on just your opponent's win percentage. So it'll be interesting to see how these tournaments go forward.
Yeah, and hey, it goes back to kind of what we were talking about. And I was watching the tournament pretty closely, watching the standings for the most part. And it goes back to that round 9 of day 1. There were, I think it was 23 tables that were X2. They were all 6-2, and had that opportunity to ID. Typically we'll see maybe 2 or 3 tables choose not to ID, and usually it's one of those people that chooses that. Typically the bigger name players. This tournament, 10 of those tables did not ID, and they played it out. So that's 20 people that normally would have made day 2 in the past structure that actually played it out, and only 10 of them ended up making the day 2. 13 of those tables did ID still, but that day 2 could have been even bigger if people kept IDing. But that's more people who I was seeing records of people going 5-1 day 2, making top 16, or 4-1-1, losing the last, going 4-0-1, losing the last round, and getting knocked out of top 32. That's where you honestly, right now, I think that is pretty telling that you should not ID in the last round. It is better to play it out and lose than ID and have to play all of day 2 and not get anything for a lot of players. I personally am on the side of you no longer should be IDing unless for some reason it's one of those really small regionals, which I don't think we're having this year.
Yeah, and to add on to that fact, last round of Swiss for day two, round 15. Guess how many tables ID'd to make top eight?
It was one, right?
One. It was
Yeah.
table one, and then that was the only table that was safe to ID into top eight. Everyone else was playing it out. There was some people still safe with just the amount of points they had, but it was crazy to see, and it made the last few rounds very competitive because there's so much on the line for these players.
Yeah, and one thing that I don't think is going to happen every single event. This was a very interesting one where Jesse Parker ran the tables of the event, kind of just dominated for a lot of the tournament, which caused it so a lot of those people who were safe and could have ID'd into Top Cut, they were not able to play the people they already played, which were the other people able to ID. So there were a lot of down pairs in that last round that normally doesn't happen as often. But because of how the dominant players who were able to ID at the end there were running the table really on this event, they dominated. It made it so there was less potential for IDs. And that's something that is going to continue to happen with a lot of top players really going for the win this year. There's no games being played anymore.
And of course, the tournament ending with Andrew Estrada winning with Kyogre in that
Mhm.
lost box or lost zone box. A deck that we knew was very powerful, but it takes a lot of skill and a lot of luck to pilot it throughout a tournament like this. And you have to see at least a lot of the matchups that Andrew had throughout all of day two. They're very good matchups for Lost Zone Kyogre. Not a lot of Manaphy in the room, and it really just ended up benefiting him very well. And his list was also very out there for what we used to see for a lot of these Lost Zone Kyogres.
Yeah, and he played it perfectly. I think he made a post after talking about, "Yep, this hurt my brain." Right? Like he as one of the greatest players of our game was like, "This hurt my brain to
Yep.
play this for this long." And I know it's said a lot. It's like the thing for Lost Box, right? Oh, it's so tough to play. It's so tough to play, but it can be played. And I think that rhetoric of it's tough to play kind of needs to slow down a little bit because I do think it is playable. It is playable at a high level. Yes, you can make some mistakes. When you have a deck that's as dominant as a deck like Kyogre, when you play it so perfectly, you're allowed to make a couple mistakes during the event. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect the entire time. Sometimes your opponent just hits. I think Andrew lost. I think it was only once. Maybe he lost twice. He lost once early in day one, but then he lost to Andrew Hedrick, right? And it was kind of only a loss because he was able to Craglanch a Energy Recycler
Yeah.
on the last turn of the game. So even that, like, you still have a little bit of luck at the end against like Lugia, who can disrupt the top of your deck, which Kyogre needs all those resources. But once you're playing the deck, and same with Turbo Lost Box, same with any of sort of these Lost Boxes, we're getting to the point where the people who have been playing them are much better at playing them. And that whole rhetoric of, oh, it's so taxing or anything like that, I don't think it's as necessarily true anymore because I think people do know how to play the deck and they have made the decisions enough now. So and Andrew, similar situation. I'm sure he has played this deck a bunch. Maybe he just picked it up. He's good enough that he could have picked it up that day and played it and won the event. I don't doubt that. But he probably had a pretty decent amount of reps with it, and even that, it was a lot of long taxing day, but he got 10 grand from it, and the first person to get an automatic invite to the World Championships. Right? He is in Worlds now. That's what that means.
Yeah.
And he has money to pay for his travel to Worlds. That's what that means. He is going to Hawaii. So it's worth it. Is kind of the point. Like, let's no more. Oh, I lost because I made some mistakes. It's no, you took the chance. It's worth it. You can win the event. It's worth it to play these types of decks.
And with Pittsburgh, we also put out our deck usage meta share and the decks that we thought would be kind of the most played going into the event. I think we did a pretty good job. Now I'm gonna put them up here and compare them between the official breakdown with our breakdown. Lost Zone Giratina, number one played deck. We got that.
Yep.
And then moving on, it's all kind of the same because they're all kind of within that 9 to 12 range, 9 to
They're
12%
all there.
range. But Lost Zone, Miraidon, Lugia, Gardevoir, and Mew. Our top four decks are Lost Zone, or top five: Lost Zone, Miraidon, Lugia, Gardevoir, and Mew. Uh,
Hmm.
Speaks pretty well to the format. Now, top eight didn't see any Gardevoir. It had a Chien Pao, Baxcalibur instead, a couple Miraidon, one Mew, one Lost Zone Giratina, and then the two Lugia, and then the Lost Zone Kyogre that ended up winning the tournament. I feel that we did pretty good, and there's Barcelona happening this weekend. It's going to be the same format. How do you think things will kind of adapt to the weekend that we had?
I say nothing changes in our list. I think Gardevoir will see more play. Gardevoir was 10. It was still heavily played, but I it just didn't do well. It did decently. Some of them did decently. I think there were Tord did well with it as always. Kind of expected of that. But it is still a very strong deck, and with what won the event, it is or what was in top eight, it is a very good deck. The Shen Pao matchup isn't the best. And that did top 8. However, Shen Pao is the deck that I don't think is going to be the more popular version or the most popular deck that came out of that top 8. It's going to stay. We have those Shen Pao fans who love the deck. Maybe a couple more people will jump on that bandwagon, but I don't think Shen Pao changes much. Maridon, I think, had an insane performance. The version not Path to the Peak is what Jesse was running, and he went 9-0 day one, kind of ran through the event until the awful matchup of Kyogre happened to be hit in the finals. I believe he even said he did not want to play against Kyogre, and happened to hit in the finals. But the Miraidon, I think we see remains one of the more popular decks. The Tina, I would expect to drop a little bit. That deck did not show up in this tournament. I think it had one copy in top 8, but for that being the most popular deck and only having one copy in top 8, and I don't know down to top 16, I didn't actually look at how many Tinas there were, or top 32, but I imagine it wasn't too many. I think the Lugias really took care of those Tinas because the Lugia does have a good matchup versus them. But I think Gardevoir definitely sees an increase in play just because of how good the deck is. And I know it's very popular in Europe in general, just that deck. Mew as well, I would say, goes up a little bit because Mew is that deck that can beat Kyogre. Even though it's not the greatest matchup, it's pretty close. When you have the disruption, you have the path to stop the Greninja, you have the Lost City to get rid of the Greninja. Because without Greninja, that deck, Kyogre, it's hard for them to get through their deck, especially late in the game. So Mew has a good chance of being able to beat that Kyogre a little bit more than some of these other decks. And I think we see less Lugia. I think for some reason Lugia was really popular. We kind of called it that it would be, but I think that's kind of over. Yeah, it made top 8, but it just loses to some of these better decks. And with Gardevoir seeing more play, Lugia also gets worse. I think Lugia did well because Gardevoir did bad in this event because Lugia just has a bad matchup versus Gardevoir. It's not that it's unwinnable, it's just not good.
Yeah, I can kind of see that too. And a lot of like big name players brought Lugia to Pittsburgh. I know Andrew Hedrick at one point was 10-0 and 1 with Lugia throughout the tournament, but he also said it himself. Like, he got insanely lucky throughout the weekend. He hit 4 Rapid Strike Inteleon Urshifu within the like first 6 rounds or something crazy like that. And
Feels good.
it's a very good matchup for Lugia. And that's what you kind of have to go in, right? You have to think, well, what kind of decks I'm going to be hitting for the tournament. I know Barcelona is going to be a smaller event. They capped out at, I don't know,
900, I believe. 900, I think it was.
900. Yeah. So half the size of what we had in Pittsburgh. You might be hitting a lot more of those, I guess, meta decks throughout the first few rounds instead of like those random 5 to 9% decks, those less than 5%. And like you said, Gardevoir is very popular in the European region. So is Mew. I think the inclusion of the Penny in the Mew that Colin played in to get third place in Pittsburgh helps a lot against Kyogre, especially when they're setting up for that late game Aqua Storm. And it's also a week, right? You're not really going to be able to change too much within a week. Granted, they're going to have their own testing and preparations aside from the people that tested for Pittsburgh, but you're also going to have a crossover, right? Like Tord was in Pittsburgh. So you have to expect that he's probably going to go to Barcelona. Might as well. A world invite is still on the line. Not as much money, but people are going
No
to
money.
be yeah, people are going to be playing for a lot, right? And uh, I guess I want to know what kind of control deck, if anything, if Sander is going and playing. That would be something cool to see. And then we've also had a lot of debate on just like the usage of time within this past week for completing games, right? And so Gardevoir, you're not really going to complete a full 3 game set uh, if that's what you're wanting, right? You win game one and hope to finish game two, and that's the mindset a lot of these players, at least on social media, are taking. Lost Zone could be kind of the same thing, but there's a lot of decks in the format where they kind of prey on that, right? Miraidon, a very fast, very hard hitting deck. Lugia, very fast, very hard hitting deck, and it's the consistency of those decks that really kind of help the player to manage their time a little bit better.
Yeah, the whole time thing, it's beating a dead horse right now.
Yeah,
I like everyone knows what's going on with time. I don't understand why people keep talking about it. Like honestly, nothing has changed. Play with what you know and what you expect of the tournament. I think I also saw there's a lot of new people in the game, and these people talking about time and slow playing are really negatively impacting a lot of these newer players who are genuinely taking some time to figure out their moves. There are people who they need more time to figure out the move. That's a harder decision. They haven't done it as much. And we have a lot of new players that are now kind of criticizing them in the middle of the game, like, hey, you need to speed up. Hey, you're slow playing me. Hey, and they're getting aggressive with it. And it's because there's this rhetoric around time that everybody who takes a couple extra seconds is a slow player. So it's causing a very negative effect, not even at the higher level, but at the lower level where people are just getting into the game, causing them to not really want to go anymore because there's so much negativity surrounding the time factor that people feel like they can't even think. So let's do better as a community. I don't know. Like, really, just stop complaining about this stuff. Like, if you're a top player and you see it's happening, you're playing against another top player, or you can tell the signs when there's some intentional, or if it's just someone's thinking. Do better about it and be able to judge that instead of just expecting every single person in the room to be a slow player. And I think that's what we have to work on as a community. Let's stop beating the dead horse and try to start fixing it as a top level down, because that's how it's going to happen.
and granted, it's a little harder with the bigger tournaments, but you are able to call a judge over and just request that they watch for pace of play. You don't have to, uh, I guess, just badger someone or really do it, but it's something that we're going to see a lot more, right? The exponential growth of the game, like you were saying, is something we haven't really seen before. A tournament like this last year would have 1,000 players.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have over 1,700, and there's bound to be new names, new players, returning players that haven't played in forever. Uh, all of them are going to have different kind of skill levels, learning levels, and like play styles as well. So as long as it's not malicious, it should be fine. And I think it boils down to just the format is also not conducive of this time rules that we have right now. A lot of actions, a lot of shuffling taking in between every action. It's not the best environment.
Yep, and that was the last point I wanted to make on this subject is you have to realize this is the format we are in. It is not necessarily malicious by people, and it's not necessarily just the fault of Pokemon. It's just the format that we are in. There are a lot of actions, a lot of things happening every single game, a lot of thinking that needs to be done where not even just Lost Box, but if I refinement the wrong thing away, I could lose this game. Or if I do Shining Arcana in the wrong order, or if I use Archeops and I get the wrong energy. These are a lot of things, a lot of shuffling. People have to realize that this is a format we are in. Once the format starts to change and we start getting more sets, then, and maybe if we get a rotation in the future, things will start to balance back out. So people need to kind of just chill on it right now. Yes, it's a part of the game. Know when it's malicious, know when it's just someone playing and thinking and wanting to give the best possible game. Because we all, there's some people out there who want to just win. They don't care. They'll take the DQ, they'll take the loss, they'll take the punishment for their opponent. But there's a lot of people out there who just want to play and have a good competitive game. So kind of figure out the difference between malicious and someone just trying to keep as competitive as possible is really what everyone needs to work on right now for it until the format shifts.
Yeah, and it'll be something we'll no doubtedly see throughout as the season goes on. It's just the byproduct of having so many people trying to play the same game, trying to do well in the game. And speaking of new sets, new formats, we are at least done for the Obsidian Flame format in the US. We are now looking towards the 151 set. Hopefully, adding in some more cards to kind of break the monotony of this kind of still Worlds format that we find ourselves in. And there's going to be a lot of pretty cards, a lot of beautiful cards, and then maybe one or two cards that will have a big impact in this set.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool cards in this set, whether they are good or not. And I don't even know if I think they're cool because they're cool or because Obsidian Flame was so not impactful. And that I want them to be cool. That card right there, the cover of the packs, the Pokemon right there, that Mew, that is going to be the number one card in the set. I don't think anyone disputes it. I think that's pretty agreed upon. Whether you like other cards or not, that Mew is going to be the most impactful card in the set. It has Instruct. I don't know what its actual ability is called, but it's Instruct. Draw until you have 3 cards in your hand once per turn. And then it has 3 colorless energies to copy the attack of the opponent's active Pokemon and use it as this attack. That card destroys Giratina.
Yeah.
That is what that card says. This card says, I destroy Giratina. I can be put into Miraidon. I can be put into Lugia because both of those can charge it up in one turn with Flaffy or Archeops. And I can just dominate the Giratina matchup, which Giratina is the most played deck, as we just saw and everyone agreed on, right? So now we have a hard counter to it, and Giratina is not like Mew, like Fusion Mew. Fusion Mew was able to recover from Drapion, recover from Spiritomb. It's always just that powerful. Tina is not. Tina already wasn't putting up big results, even though it was so popular, and now they have a really hard counter that isn't just a counter, it's also consistency for these decks. So I think that that is going to be definitely the most impactful card of this set, and I think that's pretty agreed upon.
Yeah, like you said, it goes in Miraidon, goes in Lugia. Those are the two big things that we're going to see it in. It does have a lot of play against other decks as well. And just the consistency of being able to draw until you have 3 cards. We've seen that time and time again be a good ability in the Pokemon card game. There is some other cards kind of like that are fun that maybe have potential. The Zapdos EX is also another card that we've seen in some Japanese Miraidon lists. We saw one and one Mew in the Champions League list this past weekend, take down the entire event. Uh, the Alakazam EX, I love it. You said it's terrible, so I'm gonna side with you. But I'll still play it. I'll still play it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, Alakazam, it's going to be a favorite because it's Alakazam, and Alakazam's one of the coolest Pokemon that we possibly have in the game. It's one of everyone's favorite. And the hiatus of Alakazam cards and Kadabra cards has really spiked its popularity. And that card, I mean, it looks fun. It's a cool attack. I don't think they've ever had an attack like that, and it's very cool to be able to attack from your bench. Maybe someone will break it. I don't have high hopes, but
Other than those, do you see any other card really affecting the meta? Is there any trainers coming out and any tools?
the biggest trainer I see coming from this set is actually Snatch Arm. That's the new item that gets to look at your opponent's hand and you put a Pokemon and move it to the bottom of your opponent's deck. So that card is pretty good in Mew. Real Infusion Mew is really the only deck that can play it because it's an item, it's always burnable. It has that little added bonus of, okay, I can pick away your Lugia V Star, put it to the bottom, take a look at your hand, which is kind of the biggest factor of, oh, your hand is really good, I should judge. Or your hand is terrible, I am going to not judge this turn. Right? Those are the decks that can get rewarded for it. The putting the card to the bottom of the deck, it's kind of alright. It's mainly looking at your opponent's hand and knowing, should I disrupt this hand or should I let them have it? There's a lot of times when I'm sitting there against Lost Box and I'm like, I wish I knew what was in their hand, because if they have Colress, their hand's amazing. If they don't, I want them to keep that hand. The lower chance of them having Colress, the higher chance I have of winning. So that's a big trainer that I could see Mew running a couple copies of moving forward. Other than that, the trainers, there's some cool ones. Rigid Band is cool, 30 less damage from attacks for if it's attached to a stage 1. That's an interesting card. I can't think of any real stage 1s that can really benefit off of it. Uh,
Zorark.
Zorark GX. Perfect. Yeah, very good and expanded, I would say. Um, but other than that, I don't think there's a lot of impactful trainers from what I'm just initially seeing. I think that Mew is very impactful. The Zapdos is going to be a good replacement to Flying Pikachu in the Miraidon decks. Um, the I personally, everyone who's listened to the first couple videos we had knows I love Charizard EX. I love that deck right now, and I think the Charmander is going to be a huge impact because it has 70 HP. There is a huge difference between both of your Charmanders getting knocked out by Sableye at 60 HP or only one getting knocked out. That is a big shift in the matchup that was already pretty close. So I think the 70 HP Charmander is very impactful for me personally and for any Charizard EX fans out there. Not to mention its attack is a fire energy and discards a stadium, which Path to the Peak was the other issue for the deck. So now we have an extra built-in attack to discard Path to the Peak. I think that card's very cool. But I'm not going to go on my soapbox of Charizard too much because it's just a Charmander. Not too much going on with the Charmander other than its HP. Dodrio.
Dodrio.
Dodrio's another one.
Dodrio seems fun.
I know you like Dodrio a lot, right?
Yeah. You're able to place a damage counter on it to draw a card, play it with that Zorark V Star that does more damage for each damage counter on your bench Pokemon. It's just an inherent strategy that seems really fun. No one's playing Picnic Basket, so might as well. Uh, and then on the same vein of the Charmander, I believe there's also a 70 HP Pidgey coming out, which could benefit.
No, I do
No?
not believe. No, it is a 50 HP Pidgey, but it has Call for Family.
Oh, that's terrible. No.
Yeah, so it's Call for Family for 2, but you sacrifice 10 HP for it, I believe.
Okay, well, that's not as good.
No.
But we did only see one Charizard EX deck on stream for Pittsburgh this past weekend. I do feel like it still has potential. Like all three of its benefits are still very good. High HP, low energy attack that does a bunch of damage, and energy acceleration. We'll have to see if someone's able to break it before 151 comes out. Maybe that Charmander will be able to help it out going into the future. There is a ton of Lost Box in the field, so it kind of makes sense that your stage 2 deck that only has 60 HP basics would not do well in a field like that.
Definitely struggles. Some honorable mentions. I mean, we're not too high and mighty about this set, if you can't tell by how quickly we're kind of going through it. But some honorable mention, definitely Arbok EX is very interesting in like a turbo dark deck. Its attack, for anyone who doesn't know, is 3 dark energies for 150 damage. It is a stage 1 because it's an Arbok. And it discards 2 cards from your opponent's hand. It's a or your opponent discards 2 cards. So they get to pick which 2 cards get discarded. But in a turbo lost box strategy, which trades prizes a lot, it lets you Iono Path. It lets you play Path in Darkrai decks now. So you Iono Path Arbok. And then they have no cards, they're path locked. You've already a turbo deck, so you're kind of keeping up with the prizes a little bit here or there. And then it kind of is supposed to be the game winner against lost box strategies, which was what Darkrai always struggled with. So interesting. Haven't tried it yet. I've tried a little bit of 151. Have not tried Arbok. I think it's interesting. I think it'll be cool if someone starts to do that. Um, Vulpix is my favorite Pokemon, and the Vulpix art that's coming out is adorable. So I love to see that. I will be picking up a couple of those. And the last card I personally love, but I love it and I want it to be good so bad. But I feel like it's gonna disappoint me is Wigglytuff EX.
Oh, that's the extra HP, blah blah blah, all that.
Yep, if it has a special energy, it has a plus 100 HP, making it 350 HP. It then is a stage 1, so you can play something like Rigid Band, making it 380 HP, so that you don't even really need Dunsparce. No fighting Pokemon can one-shot it anyways. And then its attack is 90 if you played a supporter card from your hand this turn, 90 more damage. The biggest issue with it is that attack costs 3. And 3 energies is not the easiest to get on a Pokemon when you're trying to Cheryl and Sharon's Care every turn.
Yeah, that would be a little tough.
Yes.
Wiggly tough.
Yes, it's a little Wigglytuff. There is a Wigglytuff that has synergy with it. It lets you attach a therapeutic energy from your hand to a Pokemon. So you can kind of, if you get going, right? This is all, if you get going, you can Wigglytuff, attack, right? Whatever. They hit you because they can never one shot you. You Sharon's Care. You use that Wigglytuff to attach a therapeutic to a Jigglypuff, attach the double turbo again, evolve it. There you go. You got another attacker. But it's a lot. It's a lot to get going. And its damage output is still only 180, 160 with the double turbo. So it's a pretty weak attacker as well. And if you whiff a supporter on a turn, you're just doing 90. So, like I said, it's gonna disappoint me. But I will be playing it for some cups.
I mean, is it really going to disappoint you then? You know, play it for a few cups, maybe win one, and then we'll manipulate the meta for the next tournament. Everyone's playing Wigglytuff.
That is how cups typically go when they are back to back like this. The meta gets manipulated quite easily by whoever wins the tournament the day before.
That seems to do it for today, though, unless you have any other final thoughts on the special event this weekend or Pittsburgh this past weekend, the new set coming out.
Definitely, yeah. If you're going to Barcelona this weekend and you haven't checked out our other video about the meta breakdown, Jeremy and I both agree that it's going to be pretty similar to that. So everything that applies in that video, we would say applies still for Barcelona. So definitely check it out. Take a look at it. We're gonna continue doing videos like that. We liked it, and that's really all that matters is that we enjoyed making it. So we're gonna continue to do those meta breakdown videos instead of tier list videos. Maybe we'll come out with a tier list video every once in a while, but for tournaments, we're gonna be doing those meta breakdowns. And yeah, take a look at it. I feel like we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising. The first thing I saw when I looked at all the graphics, I was like, oh, hey, we were kind of close.
Yeah.
Although us talking about leaving Kyogre off the list and then it just wins the tournament was kind of hindsight, but
Well, so we don't actually know how many people played Kyogre because they combined it with Turbo Lost Box. And we did say that. We said it was still a very good deck. However, we don't believe it's going to be more than 5% of the field.
that
So
is true.
I
That
don't
is
know
true.
what its actual percentage is because they don't separate it.
I think there was at least 2 in the top 32 that ended up placing there. So we'll have to see how it goes forward. I do have to expect there's going to be more Manaphy in lists this weekend in Barcelona for sure.
Yep. Definitely more Manaphy.
But with that, I want to thank y'all for sticking around, watching us. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and just have a great day. Join the Nerd Brigade.